just heard. And the angel abruptly appeared to Mary who thought at that moment in time she was alone, to Mary who did not recognize this figure before her, to Mary who likely thought this was a ghost or a spirit. Of course, she was afraid, just like we would have been afraid. That would have been very scary for all kinds of reasons. Of course she was afraid. That's why the angel told her to not be afraid. You may have seen some Renaissance paintings of this moment in time, the angel appearing to Mary. Well, don't let those peaceful strokes and soothing settings fool you. Mary was scared. He was terrified. Come on, you would have been too. Yet, through God's grace, Mary did not lock the doors to her heart and will. She hung on through her fear and was able to say in faith, "Let it be according to your will." Because she was human, of course she was afraid. Most of us here this morning can identify with Mary on that score, I think. There's enough evidence in what we read in Scripture this morning to drive home the fact that God reached out to a typical human being, a person very much representative of the rest of us, a person like you and me, and brought something wonderful into the world, and brought it into the world right through fear. Michael Andantje has written in his book, Annie's Ghost, Anil's Ghost, about two physicians speaking to each other about massacres that had taken place in the country of Sri Lanka. And one of the doctors said to the other, "All my life I've looked for one law that covers all human living. I have one word that captures it: fear. Fear is the universal." I recently checked my biblical concordance for references of fear, worry, terror, and anxiety in the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, there are literally 1,000 of them. Fear is real. It's alive and well on planet Earth. The Bible acknowledges it as such. A very important moral and political philosopher who still impacts our society today, Thomas Hobbes. He saw life and lived out of his life within the context of fear. And there are reasons for that. Pregnant with him in 1588, his mother heard the news that the Spanish Armada was attacking England, and she immediately went into labor. Hobbes writes, "Fear and I were born twins." He was born into a context of fear, and it fed everything he did and wrote. And he claimed, published, and became famous for professing that politics is driven by the fear of the other, whatever the other is. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I just happened to glimpse at the TV as I was walking by, as the news was on. I did not normally watch the news then, but what I caught terrified me. All that I recall seeing and hearing was that China had an enormous army, and that army was being mobilized, readying itself to fight someone. I was rocked to my core, the center of my being. I actually lay in bed each evening, frightened out of my wits for a while. It lasted for some time. I was convinced that there was nothing left to do but wait. I even took to keeping a wee, white-handled sheath knife next to my bed. I mean, that knife couldn't have been more at hand. It was jammed between the metal bed frame and the box spring. And it just fit there, which I took to be a blessing from God. I used to practice drawing that knife out of its leather sheath. I lived in fear. I ate, drank, lived and slept with fear. And that knife next to my bed illustrated that fear was shaping my behavior. But the weeks and months moved ever forward, and because the entire army of China never did make an appearance next to my bed, my fears eventually subsided. And I don't think I'm unique in this way. We have lots of fears. And these fears can be quite specific. And they can turn into phobias, which can take control of our lives. Here's a wee sample of some fears that we know have turned into phobias for some people. One is called coulrophobia. That's a fear of clowns. It's real for some people. Or this one, peladophobia. That's a fear of bald people. Legit. Or this one, electrophobia. Anybody know what that is? Electricity. That's what I thought. It's a fear of chickens. Who knew? And besides fear, there's the anxiety related to waiting. And waiting is perhaps one of my least favorite of human activities. And what's weird is that actually our whole relationship to God is one of waiting, isn't it? Hope and waiting, fear and waiting. There are long stretches in our lives when there seems to be nothing we can do or know on our own. We must wait for God to act with grace towards us. And we're not to forget that our lives and our destiny is in the hands of a great mystery. And Advent is all about waiting for a great mystery. And we are waiting for something big rather than something small. Yes, the tiny baby will be in the manger, but his coming sets the principalities and the powers on their ear. There are cosmic implications that go along with the entrance of God into human history. Be not afraid. Has it ever occurred to you how often those words appear in the Christmas story? Gabriel has already spoken these words to Zechariah, father-to-be of John the Baptist. Be not afraid. He's spoken those words to Joseph as Joseph was contemplating ending his engagement with Mary. Don't be afraid. To the startled shepherds in the fields keeping watch over their flocks by night, the angel says, fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy. Fear and faith, hope and doubt. These are twins, woven together, both in the Christmas story and in the story of the human condition. Despite all the angelic admonitions put together, there is no way for us mortals to avoid fear. It's built into us. But there's hope, too. In one of the greatest movies of all time, Shawshank Redemption, the character Red reflects about his friend who'd recently dug a tunnel out of prison where they were incarcerated and was heading to Mexico. And he says, Some birds aren't meant to be caged. I hope my friend can make it across the border. I hope I can see my friend and shake his hand one day. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Or Emily Dickinson, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all. Mary was offered God's gift of freedom from fear by the angel Gabriel. Mary was offered and she accepted hope. And as a mother, she was headed for some pretty bad situations too, wasn't she? In order for a person to survive a really bad situation, in order to keep one's sanity through debilitating sickness, in order to keep on doing what needs to be done through catastrophic loss like amputation, say, like divorce, like a business failing or crops failing, the soul requires hope. Reverend Karel Tyler, long since passed away, a former Dutch resistance organizer in the Second World War, and then a prisoner, then a pastor, once said about recuperating from a diseased or broken body or spirit, if you have enough hope, even the doctors can't kill you. I said that one time, and a nurse leaned over to me and said, maybe the doctors can't kill you, but the nurses could. I have a lot of respect for nurses. Now, I've been reading a book called Deep Survival. Who lives, who dies, and why? Deep Survival by Loris Gonzalez. Gonzalez writes about wilderness survival, but the principles also apply to any bad situation. And he claims, and I quote, "Those of us who go into the wilderness soon learn that experienced training and modern equipment can betray you. It's not what's in your pack that separates the quick from the dead. It's not even what's in your mind. Corny as it sounds, it's what's in your heart." A survival situation or a bad situation of any kind involving waiting will contain some degree of fear, some degree of worry and anxiety. I was thinking of the stress, the worry, the anxiety that we experience when we're waiting for word on the job that we've just applied for, or the apartment that we hope to rent, or in the case of students, the marks on exams or reports that we've just finished. There's almost an automatic correlation between waiting and fear. A large part of one's life with God involves expectation, hoping and waiting. And maybe that's why the Bible addresses our fear as much as it does, 1,000 times. For everyone that acknowledges the inevitability of fear, my flesh trembles for fear, or in fear the Israelites cried out. There are other passages that speak of God's gift of freedom from fear. Do not fear those who kill the body. You will not fear the terror of the night or the arrow that flies by day. Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings and great joy. Gabriel surprised Mary, scared Mary, and then told her not to be afraid, because he was giving a life-giving message to her. Gabriel told her that God was going into partnership with her, and that with her help, God was going to be doing a wonderful thing for the whole world through her. The angel basically said this: in whatever's coming your way, as you journey forward through the wilderness, that's your life, Mary, I want to assure you of this. Hope, goodness, gladness, and love, these are coming into the world. Of course, I'm not here to warn you of what specifically, exactly, is coming your way. Of course not. I loved reading the book, My God and I, written by Lewis Smedes. Very worthwhile. Lewis Smedes wrote this in the last days of his often difficult life. Among other events in his life, a newborn son died after one day. Lewis Smedes knew firsthand of what he spoke. He wrote, "How can it be all right when everything is all wrong?" He titled perhaps his most anguished book, written after the death of one of his dearest friends. His deepest questions were for God. While Smedes amply knew the joy of God's presence, Smedes could not let God off the hook in the dead quiet of the night, wrestling, hanging on, Jacob-like. He testifies at the close of his memoir, the issue was ultimately the other way around. It was God who would not let him go. It's been God the whole way, he writes. Not so much because God has always been pleasant company. Not because I could always feel his presence when I got up in the morning or when I was afraid to sleep at night. It was because he would not let me, he did not trust me to travel alone. For Lewis Smedes, faith and fear can and do occupy the heart. And so it was with Mary. Now, you know, in preparing this message, I naturally had to do some research. And there's this saying about research we do. It goes like this. We call it me search. Me search. And this message this morning is for all of us, of course, but it's also for me. Because I'm afraid of something that's coming up. And there's hope too, for sure, but I would tell you this morning more fear than hope. The university has something called a multi-faith prayer and meditation space. It's very close to my office. But it's used almost exclusively, no, I can say it is used exclusively by Muslim students. Now, I have lots of conversation with Muslim students because my office is right there by the multi-faith prayer and meditation space, and also by a space right outside of my office where students congregate to study and talk. And I speak to Muslim students there all the time. And I said I'd like to do a Christian service in that space. And I'd like to change the space that we're in right now to make it more hospitable to all kinds of students. And more hospitable for you and less of a study space, because the university has all kinds of study spaces. I can tell you that the Muslim students were very supportive of this idea. Yes, use that space and make this space bigger. Maybe we can get more students here, different students here. So I'm working with the university to change this space, and then hopefully in the new year we're going to start something called Wine Before Breakfast. Yeah, wine before breakfast. Why? Because we're going to have communion in that service, in that space, before students take off to classes. Is anybody going to come? That's where my fear comes in. But I hear this story of Mary and I say, God, may your will be done. I'll step up to bat. I'll swing with all I've got at the ball pitched to me, and, well, we'll see what happens. You know, at Christmas time, we are witnesses to the idea that it is right and fitting to have a mixture of fear and faith, hope and doubt in our hearts. And honestly, it's hard to believe all the details of the Christmas story. Maybe you don't or can't believe in a visit by an angel. I mean, sophisticated people don't believe in angels, right? And maybe there are other details in this story that you also find hard to believe. Admittedly, the Christmas story is a bit of a stretch. And that makes waiting for the grace of God all the more difficult. As we ask ourselves, in Mary's words, how can this be, since, and you fill in the blank with whatever you wonder about. On Friday, I received a text from a member of West End Church, where I attend. Out of nowhere, really. And that text read, and I quote, "On a day like today, I can't help but think that God is just not paying attention." You get that, right? We get that different times. And waiting amidst difficulties, like doubt and fear, makes a person wonder if they are going to hang on. Makes one wonder if they are going to be able to survive. And for our deep survival, for the ability to survive until we arrive one day and see for ourselves, to hang on until we can see and breathe and rest in the presence of God, for that we have this Christmas story to help. Do you believe that perfect love is real? Do you believe it's more real than all the hatred and all the meanness that ever was or ever will be? These are questions that Christmas asks. The angel told Mary that God is coming into the world, and therefore there's no reason to live a life that's controlled by fear. Of course, we'll not always be able to survive every adversity that comes our way either. I mean, sooner or later, your time is up, no matter what is in your heart. But the Christmas story even readies us for what the end of our life will bring. You may have too read this anguishing story about an Amish family in Pennsylvania with 9 children. One terrible winter night, a fire burned their house to the ground very quickly and took the lives of 5 children. 5 of the 9 children. The final paragraph in the story reported that when the firefighters found the remains of the oldest girl, a 14-year-old girl named Katie, she was holding the remains of the baby of the family, little Jonathan, age 2. She held him in her arms. "Be not afraid," she would have said to her brother, or modeled for her brother, or hoped for her brother. "Be not afraid." She said that by her presence, by her embrace, by her willingness to live and die in the fire with him. Oh God, thank you for Katie, for Mary. Thank you that they can be our sisters, our mothers who live their lives before us in faith and fear, hope and doubt. To be able to say with conviction, "Oh God, thank you for sending your Son to live and die, be resurrected and ascend through the fires with us. Thank you for the blessedness of your embrace that holds us close today and always. May it be as you have said. For for no word from God will ever fail. That offers us deep, deep survival in the highest. Amen. I think that our prayer following this message is going to be the song that we're going to sing next.